Hello and welcome to the ShopLogic podcast. I am your host, Adrienne. Thank you for joining me today as we talk about all things pertaining to ethical consumerism, mindful consumerism, conscious consumerism, whatever you want to call it. ShopLogic is your source to learn how what we buy affects you, others, animals, and the planet. ShopLogic is a project I created that has essentially become a website, an app, the very podcast you are listening to now, and soon to be ethical brand certifier. It's essentially a source and a database to answer all of your questions about the things that we shop for. So with me, learn how we can buy better, how to read labels and what things to look out for, and just generally be aware of how our purchases impact our health, environment, animals, and laborers. I'll discuss anything and everything we shop for, including food, personal care products, cosmetics, fashion, and much, much more. If you're like me, you want to know how you can shop guilt-free, know which brands to choose, ones that make a positive impact on animals, people, and the planet. So the ultimate goal is to learn together how we can buy better, not being so clueless as to what we support with our money, because our simple, small choices make a very big impact. On last week's episode, I discussed what's in your gym bag, featuring hydration information, thermoses versus water bottles, dieting trends, food delivery subscriptions, and unnatural products that promise weight loss. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about ethical aspects of shopping, so basic questions you might want to ask, points you probably never considered, things like parent companies, packaging, fair trade, palm oil and petroleum, and the longevity of clothing and materials. So let's get right into it without further ado. Here are some essential ethical aspects of shopping to consider. Things you might want to ask before adding products to your cart without thinking twice. At the top of the list, we have the environmental impact. So questions you might want to ask: was this made sustainably? How much waste or pollution does it create after you use it? And can it be reused, recycled, or composted? Consider organic or sustainably sourced materials, minimal or recyclable packaging, the carbon footprint. So this is something, if you think about the energy that goes into things, whether it required factory work or machinery, so even our food, how that is sourced, you can find carbon footprints and water footprints on the ShopLogic database. So for instance, if you download the app, the ShopLogic app, you can look up ingredients and see how many carbon emissions, CO2s, are being emitted for every pound of broccoli that is made, for instance. And the same goes for water, because everything we consume requires water, whether it's a plant that needs water to grow, or even in terms of animal-derived products like meat and cheese and milk and eggs, and even materials. If you're considering things like leather or cotton, it all requires water. So the tip here is to choose durable, long-lasting products, which often has the biggest environmental benefit. The next key point to consider when buying things is the labor and the human rights. So questions to ask here are workers being paid fairly? Are the working conditions safe? And was child or forced labor involved in an object's production? Consider fair trade certifications. That's usually what I go for when trying to find key things that need to be fair trade, which we'll get to in just a moment. Transparency about factories and sourcing. Also, what are some ethical fashion brands versus fast fashion? Industries like fast fashion and electronics actually have historically faced scrutiny for labor conditions. Number 3, this is a key point for me, is the animal welfare. So people like to say that being vegan is not just a diet, being vegan is a lifestyle. So you are considering if any of the materials or ingredients or what have you were derived from animals who might be exploited. Questions to ask would be, were animals harmed in production? And because we often don't know, it's better to err on the side of caution here. And that is why a lot of people who subscribe to the vegan diet and the vegan lifestyle opt out of supporting anything where an animal might have been used in any way, not just killed, but just used in general in the process. Another question, is the product cruelty-free? This is a big one for things like toothpaste and shampoo and soap. This is all tested on animals historically, and thankfully now there are so many brands out there that are cruelty-free. Something to remember too is just because it's cruelty-free doesn't mean it's vegan. So for instance, you might see a keratin conditioner, which can say that they are cruelty-free because they did not test that on rabbits, guinea pigs, mice, mice and rats in a laboratory. However, keratin is typically derived from a bovine animal like a cow. And so just because they say it wasn't tested on animals, it might actually still contain an animal ingredient. Another thing to consider, are animal-derived materials even necessary? So with the plant-based diet, it's been proven over and over again, you don't need to eat animals or animal products, animal foods. To maintain a healthy diet, it's actually better to remove all of those types of animal ingredients from your diet and switch those out for plant-based protein, vegetables, grains, legumes, that sort of thing. Consider looking for cruelty-free certifications, especially in cosmetics. Some people will choose free-range or humanely raised food sources. This can be questionable because a lot of times, how do you really know what the conditions are? Just if something is certified free-range, like eggs in this case, free-range eggs, well, they kind of push the boundaries literally on what is considered free-range. So you might be picturing chickens running around on acres and acres of farmland living a decent life, when free range actually only means a small contained area where they can choose to use or not, and that's usually filled with a lot of other chickens. So the term free range in the animal welfare community is not really a valid way of knowing whether it's humane or not. So again, if you can't see what's really happening, then err on the side of caution and consider a lot of plant-based alternatives. Thankfully, the world is truly waking up to the fact that we don't need to be using and exploiting and killing animals in order for us to survive. Not anymore. There's a lot of awareness, and thankfully because of it, you and me as consumers can make better choices, which essentially tells these industries and these brands that we want something that is more humane. That's why it's so important to shop ethically, because our choices, our support with our dollars really do make a difference at the end of the day. Another ethical question you might want to ask is corporate ethics. Questions might be, does the company practice transparency? Are they hiding something? Do they support social causes or exploit loopholes? Do they avoid harmful political or environmental practices? So consider things like corporate social responsibility. This is called CSR, and their reports. Consider histories of scandals or ethical violations, and consider supporting small or local businesses instead, because more times than not, they usually like to be transparent to their consumers. And just quickly, back to companies that might exploit loopholes also pertains to companies that have parent companies. So one example is these major corporations, if they're the parent company, they can run animal testing and all these experiments, but their sub companies or their child companies, what have you, the smaller companies might say that they are cruelty free because they did not do the animal testing. It was the parent company that in fact conducted the animal testing. So they can be very tricky. They can get away with a lot of stuff and create a false image that is not at all transparent. Another ethical question to ask when shopping for products is the economic and social impact. Does something support my local economy? Does my purchase empower marginalized communities? Am I supporting cultural appropriation or authentic creators? So in this case, consider buying local. Support minority-owned businesses, and respect cultural heritage. Also, another point to consider for an ethical question, personal consumption ethics. In other words, beyond the product itself, you can ask, do I really need this? And my rule of thumb is if I don't love it, I'm going to put it back on the shelf. It helps me really create boundaries when shopping so I don't overspend, and really asking myself if I'm going to use it or if it's going to be something else that's just not going to get used and collect dust and then eventually just get donated. You can ask yourself, am I buying because of social pressure or impulse? Impulse would be, retail therapy. You feel like by shopping and buying stuff that you're being productive in some way, and that's usually a very fleeting feeling and a temporary high that goes away and you realize, oh, what have I done? I've spent too much. I didn't even need any of this crap. Social pressure is definitely in the sense of like around holidays, around Christmas time, or different events. you might feel the pressure to buy a lot of gifts for other people, and that can be great, but it's important to ask yourself, are they really going to use it? Do they really need it? Is this really going to get its mileage worth? Ethical shopping often starts with mindful consumption, not just which brands to choose. Here's a really quick ethical shopping checklist for you. Before buying, ask, is it necessary? Who made it and under what conditions? What's the environmental impact? And does it align with my values? This is so critical these days because I feel like there are so many of us out there who shop and they really don't think twice. They don't ask what they're buying. They're not being mindful. They're just seeing a good deal and putting it in their cart. Maybe they're attracted to different marketing techniques like the psychology of marketing, where something looks flashy and the design is good and the label looks good and everything looks very positive. It creates this positive impression of a product or brand when that might absolutely not be the case. Maybe they're trying to portray themselves as being healthy and they're really not, or they're just putting something in a very attractive, pretty package when the actual contents itself is not so great for whatever reason. I think it's really sad when shoppers do not think really thoroughly about what they're buying. And I get it. We're in a hurry. We don't have a lot of time. We just got to get the grocery list checked off and get out of the store, because it could actually be very stressful shopping if it's crowded, if you're feeling overwhelmed. The fluorescent lighting does not help. But it's just a shame when you consider how many people really don't even ask how this is affecting their health, how this item is affecting other people in the world who had to produce it, how the packaging is just going to go in the landfill, if it's single-use plastic packaging, for instance, or how much time, effort, energy went into creating something. So there aren't just a world of problems when it comes to shopping. There are so many solutions. That's why it's really up to you to be the wise one here and be very informed and educated about the choices you're making. When I shop, the basics are, I try to shop healthy. That is not always the case. It's, again, not even about perfection. Perfection is impossible. It's just not realistic. So try to make healthier choices. You can indulge in some junk food too. But I think all in all, the majority of what you buy, you're going to want to ask, is it healthy? Is it benefiting my body, or is it working more to destroy it? Is it helping or hurting? I definitely consider the packaging if given the option, let's say for lettuce and for salads and that sort of thing. Salad kits are really great and quick and easy because you don't have to think. All the ingredients are just right there. But oh my gosh, the single-use plastics that's involved in a salad kit is just a lot. It is not the sustainable choice if you have the option of buying lettuce that is in the recyclable plastic container instead. Well, that's just one example of packaging. So is it healthy? What's the packaging like? Is it organic? And yeah, I know organic can get actually very expensive, but there are some key foods that you want to definitely buy organic. They're called the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen is a group of 12 key foods, like fruits and vegetables. It's produce that is often really heavily sprayed with pesticides. Ugh. And the pesticides, guess what? You just can't fully wash them off. For a full list of the Dirty Dozen, you can actually look on ShopLogic's website or app and find that list. So it's things that you want to opt for organic. And it's not just what you're putting in your body in terms of the pesticides, it's the impact it's creating on the environment and wildlife, because it's just like full-blown toxic chemicals. And the whole point of pesticides is to get the produce, the fruits and vegetables, to grow without being eaten and destroyed by insects and pests and invasive creatures and critters and what have you. So that's why pesticides exist, but it doesn't have to be like that. It's just gotten out of control with the pesticides. Different countries have different regulations, and sadly in the US, our pesticide use is awful. It's really awful. So there are things that you want to buy at the grocery store that are certified organic or USDA organic. So yes, when I shop, it's like, okay, is this somewhat healthy? Is it, the healthier choice? Think of the packaging. Think of, does it have to be organic? Also, fair trade. So there are certain key ingredients and products that you should definitely buy fair trade. Just a few being chocolate, coffee, bananas. These are from countries where they often exploit the labor workers very badly. So there are just a couple things you want to be looking out for in that sense. And for me, I live a vegan diet and lifestyle. So So I absolutely, when I grocery shop or even shop for clothing, want to make sure that there's no animals that have been used. I don't buy meat, I don't buy cheese or dairy milk, no eggs, no honey. I was never really a fan of honey anyway. Even as far as like shoe shopping with leather and suede and things like that. So I want to definitely be looking out for animals. So moving along to our next topic, these are points you probably never considered when shopping. So even if you think you're, a pro, expert, ethical consumer, but here's some other points. What about the parent companies? What about the packaging? What things should be fair trade? Also, palm oil and petroleum is in a shocking amount of things that we buy, and the longevity of clothing and materials. So getting into the parent companies, what are major parent companies that are unethical because of animal testing, environment, etc.? So I'm going to list several major parent companies that have faced significant criticism, investigations, even boycotts. L'Oreal owns, as a parent company, obviously L'Oreal Paris, Lancome, Vichy, Garnier, Giorgio Armani. My gosh, there are so many. NYX, Maybelline, Essie, Kiehl's, Redken, The Body Shop, Urban Decay, so many more household names. L'Oreal's mostly in the cosmetics and toiletries category here. So the criticism with L'Oreal, they have historically conducted animal testing for cosmetics. They sell products in markets like mainland China, where animal testing has been required. Yes, it's actually mandatory for products in China that you're going to put on your skin or your hair or what have you to be tested on animals, because I guess they're thinking before we let humans use it, we got to make sure that animals aren't reacting to it. But it doesn't have to be like that. China is one of the only countries in the world that operates in this fashion where it's mandatory to test. While they might market some of their smaller brands in the US and Europe as, oh yeah, we're cruelty free, we don't test on animals, they absolutely will if they sell their products in China. So a lot of brands' reaction to that is, we are cruelty free through and through, and that means we do not sell in China. So that's something to look out for. L'Oreal also uses palm oil derivatives linked to deforestation. Parent companies that are unethical, Estee Lauder, again with the beauty and cosmetics category. Estee Lauder owns brands like MAC, Clinique, La Mer, and Too Faced. Two-faced, isn't that funny? So the criticism here is that animal testing, again, due to selling in regions that require it, and environmental concerns over packaging waste and sourcing ingredients. Procter & Gamble, they own so much, it's crazy. Just to name a few: Pampers, Gillette, Olay, and Head & Shoulders. Procter & Gamble has a long history of animal testing. I think that even in the US, a lot of these brands, if it doesn't say cruelty-free or not tested on animals, then guess what? It absolutely has been tested on animals. So it's almost like they're guilty unless it's labeled to be innocent. Again, erring on the side of caution. That should be the name of this episode. Yes, history of animal testing, palm oil sourcing, again linked to deforestation, rainforest destruction, and plastic waste concerns. Unilever, the other parent company to watch out for. They own Dove, Axe, even Ben & Jerry's, and Hellmann's. And their criticisms, they've historically done animal testing in some of their categories. They are a large palm oil purchaser. Although they have sustainability pledges, that's one of those really gray areas. Like, deforestation just comes with the territory in terms of palm oil. So how sustainable can that really be? Nestle. So Nestle, as a parent company, they are going to be more in the food industry, and they own Purina, the pet food, Nespresso, and Kit Kat. And so they are criticized for water extraction controversy, palm oil sourcing that links to deforestation, plastic pollution, and animal testing, even in the pet food and nutrition studies. So that's something we probably don't think about, is like they're even testing pet foods on animals. Johnson & Johnson is another major parent company. They own Neutrogena, Aveeno, and Tylenol. And their critiques, past animal testing practices, it's hard to say what is meant by past. A lot of them still test on animals to this day. Johnson & Johnson has environmental violations and lawsuits going on in some regions, and plastic waste and pharmaceutical pollution concerns. So because they're in like the big time chemical industry with medicine, A lot of medicine is tested on animals. It's really hard to find, like an aspirin or what have you, remedies for, common everyday things like cold and sinus, flu, headaches, belly aches that's not been tested on animals. That is really sad. But in some categories, you kind of have to bite the bullet. So if there is such a brand that exists for different types of medicines you might need that has not been tested on animals, that's preferred. But sometimes you just have to look out for your own health and safety first. But sadly, keep that in mind that when you even buy medicine, animals have probably been used. ExxonMobil is another major parent company to look out for. I mean, their industry, oil and gas. So they're a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, accused of funding climate misinformation, and have oil spills that impact wildlife and ecosystems. I think all of the oil and gas industry is pretty corrupt and unsustainable, but this is something that we can't necessarily live without. So many of these companies now publish sustainability or cruelty-free commitments. Animal testing laws do vary by country, sometimes forcing companies to comply if they want to sell there, and cruelty-free brands owned by a parent company may still be under a corporation that conducts animal testing elsewhere. What I strongly suggest, again, is to check out the ShopLogic app. Why? Because you can so quickly look up any of the brands that you're shopping for or curious about, and I will tell you, do they produce vegan products? A lot of companies do, yeah. Are they a fully vegan brand? No, not always. So that's something you might want to choose, a fully vegan brand across the board instead of one that you might be buying a vegan product, but you're still supporting a company that is not vegan in their other products. And do they test on animals? Is it cruelty free? And then not just that, but I also have done you the favor of listing the parent company if they have one. So if they have a parent company, I will tell you if they test on animals or not. And I do include whether or not they sell in China, which by default means they must test on animals if they want to sell in the Chinese market. So be sure to check that out. I consider everything and put all of this information in a very quick snapshot, easy to read, manageable way of looking at information so that you are not bogged down and overwhelmed with too many details. You don't have to sift through paragraphs of information just to get your answer. That was the whole point of creating the ShopLogic app, is to very quickly see a summary of the things that matter most to you and to me. So moving from parent companies to packaging, let's discover sustainable versus unsustainable packaging materials that are commonly used in products. So here are some sustainable ones: paper and cardboard. Paper and cardboard would be common in Amazon boxes, cereal boxes, and takeaway containers. It's sustainable because it's biodegradable, recyclable. Depends though on the food, if it's been like a food box. It also depends on where you live, if they are willing to take that as a recyclable material, and often made from recycled content. It also, yes, biodegradable means it can just compost in the ground pretty easily. A side note, cardboard is not sustainable if it's heavily coated with plastic or contaminated with food waste. Number 2, glass. Very sustainable, common in beverages, sauces, and cosmetics. Why is it sustainable? Well, it's 100% recyclable, can be reused multiple times. I even directly reuse some glass jars for storing things around the house, for instance, and there's no chemical leaching. So it's probably also a health component as well. Soda bottles, jam jars, that type of thing. However, it is energy intensive to produce and transport, because if you think about it, glass is going to be a heavier material, which means it is not lightweight. It's not as easy to take from point A to point B in a truck. Number 3, aluminum. Aluminum is common in soda cans, canned food. Why is aluminum sustainable? It's infinitely recyclable, high recycling value. I guess that's why, they do mark a value on cans in some states, 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever. And aluminum is lightweight compared to glass. So yeah, most commonly found in beverage cans. Bioplastics, these would be materials like PLA and compostable plastics. They're common in takeaway containers and cutlery, and these are sustainable because they're made from plant materials like cornstarch and sugarcane, and industrially compostable. They do require proper composting facilities, which are not always available, but this isn't just your average plastic. This is the plastic that is like, it usually always says on there, like, this was made made sustainably or from recycled materials and that sort of thing. So here are some unsustainable packaging materials. Single-use plastics. I say that a lot. PET, PVC, polystyrene, common in water bottles, snack wrappers, and takeaway containers. Not sustainable because it's not biodegradable. It can literally take hundreds of years. Yes, essentially everything can and will biodegrade eventually, but do we really want to wait hundreds of years? And that has implications as well. You want things that can turn into soil much, much faster. Also, it's not often recycled and contributes to ocean pollution. So it's having a direct negative impact on wildlife. So most commonly found in water bottles. Give last week's episode a listen if you want to hear me discuss water bottles, the sustainable and health aspects, the pros and cons, water bottles versus thermoses in your hydration information, as I like to call it. Number 2, styrofoam. Styrofoam is not at all sustainable. You're going to find this from takeout boxes and protective packaging, like those peanuts in boxes. Not sustainable because it's rarely recycled, breaks into microplastics, and has long decomposition time. Multi-layer mixed packaging. This would be common in chips, juice boxes, candy wrappers. It's not sustainable because it's a combo of plastic, foil, and paper, and extremely difficult to recycle. Yeah, these would be like your snacks that you're eating, not often coming in sustainable packaging. So the conclusion here is that the most sustainable packaging options are reusable glass, recyclable aluminum, recycled paper and cardboard, and properly composted bioplastics. The least sustainable options are single-use plastic, styrofoam, multi-layer laminated packaging. Moving on to the next topic of ethical consumer questions and aspects you've probably never considered. So what products should you buy fair trade? Buying fair trade helps support better wages, safe working conditions, community development, and environmentally sustainable practices in supply chains around the world. Common fair trade product categories, drum roll please, would be coffee. Fair trade coffee ensures farmers receive fair prices for beans and have more stable incomes. A lot of brands also invest in community projects through their fair trade premiums. Chocolate and cocoa. Cocoa often comes from small farms in West Africa and other regions. Fair trade chocolate is going to help reduce child labor and ensure fair compensation for growers. Bananas, probably one of the most widely traded fruits in the world. Fair trade certification is going to help protect workers' rights and environmental practices on large plantations. Tea. Fair trade tea supports worker welfare and farm sustainability in the major producing countries such as India, Kenya, and Sri Lanka. Cotton and textiles. Fair trade cotton means better pay and safer working environments for farmers and workers in the fashion supply chain. Sugar. Fair trade sugar ensures cane farmers receive fair prices and invest in community projects like education and healthcare. Wine. I would not have thought of that one. I'm surprised, but some wines carry fair trade certification, meaning their grape growers and workers benefit from fair wages and workplace protections. Personal care and beauty, so products like fair trade shea butter, cocoa butter, and other plant-derived ingredients support ethical sourcing for skincare and hair care. So these would be ingredients found in beauty and personal care that come from parts of the world that are more underdeveloped nations that don't usually have workers' rights strong in place. So yes, shea butter, cocoa butter. A product contains those ingredients. You should opt for fair trade. Spices and condiments. Items like vanilla, cumin, pepper give small farmers fair access to the global market. So you're thinking, why choose fair trade and what certifications to even look for? You need to look for the Fair Trade International or Fair Trade USA, which means farmers and workers are getting paid fair prices. There are safer working conditions that are upheld. Extra funds, like their premiums, are invested in community development, and environmental standards are a nice bonus. Those are also encouraged. So look for labels like Fair Trade Certified, Fair Trade USA, Fair Trade International, and World Fair Trade Organization, WFTO. So just start with some everyday items like coffee, tea, chocolate. Maybe just start with coffee and, whatever is available to you where you live. Coffee is one if you drink it every day, or tea. It's a product that you're buying very frequently. So find a brand you like that's fair trade certified and you can stick with that brand. So even when switching out just a few items in your shopping basket to fair trade versions, it can support thousands of small producers worldwide. So you are having a very positive impact on fellow human beings around the world. And who could argue that? Next, we have palm oil and petroleum. So these are questions you might not frequently ask or consider when shopping. But the question is, what products commonly contain palm oil and petroleum, and how to know and avoid supporting those industries. Such ingredients are hidden in far more products than most people realize. And if you're trying to reduce your environmental impact, such as deforestation, habitat loss, fossil fuel use, and plastic pollution, you should absolutely know where they show up. So products that often contain palm oil be food. It is in a lot of our food items. Why? Because palm oil is cheap. It's shelf stable and semi-solid at room temperature. So foods that you might find, or often find rather, palm oil in would be packaged cookies and crackers, chocolate and candy bars, instant noodles, didn't expect that to come up, margarine and shortening, ice cream, peanut butter, some brands at least, breakfast cereals, and frozen meals. So here are clues on how to read the labels, because palm oil has many disguises. It could be called palm oil, palm kernel oil, palmoline, vegetable oil, which is a very general vague term that could very often include palm oil, and sodium palmate, which is in food additives. I have an extremely long list on the ShopLogic website of all of the names that palm oil goes under or goes by, as a in disguise, incognito way of getting you to buy something that contains palm oil. And even if you're trying to look out for it, it might go by a completely different name. If you see the word palm in any ingredient, with the exception of like date palms, like if you're buying dates, it'll say they come from a date palm tree. If it's like palmitate, palm kernel oil, palmoline, like all these different variations of palm, that's going to be palm oil, and you want to put it back on the shelf. It's also just not good for you in terms of health. Palm oil is going to also show up in a lot of personal care and cosmetics. If you're mindful of palm oil and trying to avoid it, wow, it's extremely difficult finding soap, like just a bar of soap that does not the next time you go shopping for soap, or you're just curious and you're in the cosmetics and personal care toiletries aisle, check out a couple of the labels on various soaps and you will see what I'm talking about. The palm oil derivatives are extremely common in items like shampoo, body wash, bar soap, toothpaste, lotion, makeup, deodorant. Names that it's going to go by, and this will throw you for a loop because you're like, I would have never thought that was palm oil. Sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS. Guess what? That's from palm oil. It's a palm oil derivative. Sodium lauryl sulfate, SLES. Glycerol stearate, cetyl alcohol, stearic acid, palmitic acid. Household products is going to be another category where we see palm oil come up again and again. Laundry detergent, dish soap, surface cleaners, and candles, some of which use palm wax. And here are some products you'd be really surprised about. So not palm oil anymore. We're talking about petroleum. This is fossil fuel derivatives. Petroleum is used to make plastics, synthetic fabrics, and many cosmetic ingredients. Plastic bottles, food wrappers, grocery bags, styrofoam containers, and disposable cutlery are all subject to coming from petroleum, like fossil fuels, like as in oil and gas and that whole industry. Personal care ingredients, petroleum-derived ingredients are going to be mineral oil, paraffin, PEG compounds. These are things found in lip balm, lotion, makeup, hair gel, ointments, and even clothing and textiles. Synthetic fibers are petroleum-based, so polyester, nylon, acrylic, and spandex. You probably did not know that when you're wearing your spandex yoga pants or whatever, that there has been fossil fuels in the production of that. That is an example of that. Those are examples of some fabrics, materials that you're thinking, oh, they're better than the alternative because they're vegan, they're not animal derived. But just because it's vegan and not coming from an animal, it can be very destructive and harmful in terms of sustainability in its production and how it decomposes or doesn't, not for a long time at least. Which is why if you look on the ShopLogic app at the fabrics and materials section, I list all kinds of things, and you'll see, for instance, acrylic, which is a very, very common material. I guarantee you probably have acrylic materials and fabrics in your closet as part of your clothing. It is not very good. So again, I'm not biased. I'm not saying, oh, it's vegan, so therefore it's the best ever. It's like, no, there are plenty of non-vegan things that still can be problematic. So you're thinking, oh my God, how do I avoid supporting these industries? I don't like palm oil. I don't like petroleum. And because it's all around us in so many products, I mean, everything that I just named, from our foods to our clothes to our lipstick to like shampoo and toothpaste and soap, it's like you can't live without these items. But how do you avoid supporting these industries you do not want to contribute to? So read the ingredient list carefully. Look out for that palm keyword and ingredients, mineral oil, paraffin, PEGs, any poly ingredients, POLY. Those are things to all watch out for. But it sounds like a lot of work, but when you do read labels and you finally find a brand and a product that is a very good example of something that you can trust, the great news is you just keep buying that product again and again. So you don't have to do this research each and every single time you shop, because now you've already learned which products are the bad ones and which are the good ones. Also, look for certifications. And with palm oil, you can find RSPO certified. It stands for Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil and Rainforest Alliance. But certification is like improving the practices, but it's very debated because I don't fully trust it. Again, it's palm oil is palm oil. How can you say it's responsible? you know, so I prefer just fully avoiding it altogether and choose alternatives. So instead of palm oil products, what else can they use? Sunflower oil, olive oil, coconut oil. So the world doesn't need palm oil as much as it's being used. It's just the cheapest option, which is why all these major industries keep using it. They completely destroy the rainforests, particularly in Indonesia, I believe. But it doesn't have to be that way because there are so many alternatives. Instead of petroleum-based products, you can look for glass or metal containers opposed to plastic. You can look for natural fiber clothing, cotton, hemp, linen, wool, and bar soap instead of the bottled. But again, look out for palm oil with bar soap. Reduce your consumption overall. So the biggest impact can come from buying fewer packaged foods, cooking from scratch, buy secondhand clothing, and using refill stores. On the ShopLogic app, I list brands that are notorious for using palm oil in their products. And this applies especially with food. So I think that's a good one because the food industry, there's so many brands that are palm oil free and they're very proud of that. And so they'll be very transparent and clear and let you know right away directly, like across all of our products that we produce, we do not include palm oil or palm oil derivatives as ingredients. So you can check that out if this is something that irks you as much as it does me. Just thinking about the rainforest getting torn down and all of the displaced wildlife is very, very upsetting, but there are solutions. And lastly, we're going to talk about the longevity of clothing and materials. So what's something that would be long lasting and durable? And the reason this is important is because then we don't go through clothes as quickly. We don't just participate in fast fashion and trendy items that get thrown away because we just didn't have much of a use, or they like fall apart in the washing machine and dryer. And because it was such poor quality, you have no choice because now it's got holes in it and it's just a really flimsy, unreliable material to consume. So for clothing longevity, you want to look at the fabric, so the fiber type, and the construction quality. So is it weaved, stitched, or how is it finished? So here are the most durable materials and what makes them long lasting. We have natural fibers, high longevity if the quality is good. So wool is here, although I don't condone wool because not only are you using sheep and other animals that are exploited on farms, and that's actually a very painful process for them when they're sheared. Also, it's saying here it has to be very good quality wool. Otherwise, it's not going to last, but it can last because it's naturally elastic, so it resists wrinkles. It's odor resistant, meaning it needs less washing, stronger fiber, and it retains shape. For sweaters, coats, suits, and socks, longevity can be 5 to 20 years with proper care. But I don't know about you, but when I had wool sweaters back in the day, I somehow always managed to shrink them. So I don't know. I think it's one that requires extra care. So leather is another item that's super durable. Although, again, I wouldn't really condone this because it's not just about exploiting an animal and using an animal. In this case, you have to kill the cow in order to produce leather. But it's also about the environmental impact that comes with cows and their huge population. They're bred onto the planet. There are more cows on Earth than there are humans. That is a real statistic. That's a real fact. And they consume water, they consume lands, they consume food. And so they also emit a lot of carbon into the environment. So like they have a high CO2, or they have a high carbon footprint, they have a high water footprint. So it is just not that sustainable. However, I will say leather does last because it's extremely strong. It doesn't really wear out. It could be condition restored, good for jackets, boots, belts, bags. You can get 10 to 30 years out of leather, and full grain leather lasts a lot longer than bonded or corrected leather. If you see these things at the thrift store, it kind of depends on the person. If you are really hardcore vegan, you might not want to be seen wearing a leather jacket, even if you did buy it from the thrift store. But, maybe you don't feel that way. Like maybe you don't really care as long as you've salvaged something, you kept it from the landfill. You are extending the longevity of that particular jacket or belt or bag because you're continuing to use it when someone else did not want it and would have otherwise just thrown it away. So it's really up to you how you feel about secondhand wool or secondhand leather. I would definitely suggest that over purchasing it new because you're not directly supporting the industry with your money. So linen is a vegan fabric that is also very sustainable. It lasts because it's very strong and natural, gets softer over time, resistant to pilling, best for summer shirts and trousers, and you can get 5 to 15 years out of linen. Cotton, if it's high quality and long staple, that can be very durable and long lasting. It's breathable, comfortable. It's durable when woven tightly and easy to repair. The best types would be long staple cotton, Egyptian cotton, heavyweight cotton, and you can get 3 to 10 years out of it. So on the flip side, the thin, fast fashion cotton is going to wear out very quickly, or probably like warp when you go to wash it. Synthetic fibers can be very strong and abrasion resistant. Polyester, for instance, it resists shrinking and stretching. It holds the color, best for active wear and outer wear, and you can get 5 to 15 years out of that. Nylon lasts because it's extremely abrasion resistant. It's lightweight but strong, and it's common in outdoor gear, so things like jackets, backpacks, performance wear, and you can get about 7 to 20 years out of that. And the most durable everyday fabric, denim, especially if it's raw denim. It lasts because of its thick cotton twill weave. It becomes stronger with wear, and it's repairable with patching or darning. It can last 5 to 20 years, and heavier denim lasts way longer than the stretch denim. So weave and construction matter more than the fiber alone. You can make clothes last longer if you wash them less often, use cold water, store them properly, repair early, and avoid excessive stretch fabrics. So materials that do not last long would be low quality thin cotton, rayon viscose, low to medium durability, modal, especially thin versions, elastane spandex, faux leather or bonded leather, cheap polyester blends, which are very thin. And that would be because faux leather or PU leather, its main problem is that it peels and cracks. Thin acrylic, you're going to have a lot of pilling. High stretch fabric loses elasticity. And thin cotton has weak fibers. Rayon viscose is very weak when wet. So if you want maximum longevity, choose heavy fabric weight, avoid high stretch, avoid very thin silky fabric, and check stitching and seams to see the quality. Avoid anything that already feels fragile. So that was our episode today. I hope you enjoyed the ethical aspects of shopping, basic questions to ask, and points you probably never considered, like the parent companies, the packaging, fair trade, palm oil and petroleum, and the longevity of clothing and materials. So if you like this episode, be sure to follow, like, comment, subscribe, what have you. Check out the ShopLogic website, the ShopLogic app, and follow on socials like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's your number one source for learning together how we can buy better. So thank you for listening, as always.